Scott Ross crouched behind a crumbling wall, his pulse rifle clutched tightly against his chest. The air reeked of ozone and burning flesh. Explosions rocked the alien landscape of Terria, sending plumes of purple dust into the atmosphere. As he peered over the wall, his eyes widened in horror. The enemy forces had stooped to a new low, using Terrian slaves as living shields. Among the huddle of terrified aliens, a female Catarian caught Scott's attention. Her iridescent scales shimmered despite the grime and fear etched on her face. In that moment, Scott made a decision that would alter the course of the war in his life. He keyed his comm unit. "Command, this is Sergeant Ross. I'm initiating a rescue operation. Those bastards are using civvies as shields." "Negative, Ross. Stick to the mission. We can't risk—" Scott cut the transmission. He'd face the consequences later. Right now, lives were at stake. With practiced efficiency, Scott checked his weapon and armor systems. The advanced human technology gave him an edge, but he was still outnumbered. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next. In a blur of motion, Scott vaulted over the wall. His enhanced muscles propelled him forward as he unleashed a barrage of covering fire. The enemy scattered, momentarily stunned by the brazen attack. "Run!" Scott shouted at the slaves, gesturing wildly. "This way!" Some of the Terrians broke free, scrambling towards him. Others remained frozen in fear. The female he'd noticed earlier stumbled, her leg injured. Without hesitation, Scott scooped her into his arms. Her scales were smooth against his armor, her body surprisingly light. He could feel her rapid heartbeat as he sprinted for cover, dodging enemy fire. Pain exploded in Scott's side as a shot found its mark. He gritted his teeth, pushing through the agony. The mission wasn't over yet. Finally, they reached the relative safety of the human lines. Medical teams rushed forward, attending to the freed slaves. Scott gently set down the female Terrian before collapsing, the adrenaline fading and the pain taking hold. Hours later, Scott awoke in a makeshift field hospital. His wound had been treated, but a dull ache persisted. As his vision cleared, he saw a familiar face approaching his bed. It was the Terrian female he'd carried to safety. "I am Kalar," she said, her voice melodious yet filled with determination. "You saved my life, human. By the ancient customs of my people, I now owe you a life debt. I must repay you through servitude." Scott blinked, taken aback. "What? No, that's not necessary. I was just doing my job." Kalar's expression grew troubled. "You do not understand. To refuse would bring great shame upon me and my family. I must insist." Before Scott could argue further, a senior officer approached. "Sergeant Ross, a word." The officer's tone left no room for debate. In hushed tones, the officer explained the situation. High Command saw an opportunity in Kellar's offer, a chance to gather invaluable intelligence on Tarian culture and technology. Despite Scott's protests and moral objections, the decision had been made. He was to accept Kellar's servitude. Scott looked back at Kalar, conflict evident on his face. He joined this war to fight for freedom, not to become a slave owner. Yet now he found himself caught between human military objectives and Tarian cultural imperatives. With a heavy sigh, Scott nodded to Kellar. "All right, you can stay with me, but we need to talk about what this arrangement means." As Kellar's face lit up with relief, Scott couldn't shake the feeling that his life, and perhaps the course of the war itself, had just changed irrevocably. Scott's decision to accept Kellar's offer of servitude set in motion a chain of events he could never have anticipated. Within days, he found himself reassigned to a joint human-Tarian cultural exchange program aboard the orbital station Concordia. As the shuttle docked with the massive structure, Scott couldn't help but feel a mix of apprehension and curiosity. The station hung in geosynchronous orbit above Kataria, its sleek metallic form a stark contrast to the purple and green hues of the planet below. "This will be our new home," Scott explained to Kalar as they disembarked. The Katarian's iridescent scales shimmered under the station's artificial lighting, her large eyes taking in every detail of their surroundings. "It is different from what I expected," Kalar said, her melodious voice tinged with wonder. Before Scott could respond, a tall, slender man in a lab coat approached them. Sergeant Ross, welcome to Concordia. I'm Dr. Marcus Chen, lead scientist for the exchange program. Dr. Chen's eyes darted between Scott and Kaler, a hint of excitement in his gaze. I've been briefed on your unique situation. I believe it presents an unprecedented opportunity for fostering understanding between our species. Scott nodded, trying to mask his discomfort. Happy to help, Doctor. What exactly will we be doing here? As they walked through the station's pristine corridors, Dr. Chen outlined their roles. Scott would serve as a military liaison, while Kalar would assist in translating Tarian language and customs. Your insights will be invaluable, Dr. Chen said to Kalar. We have so much to learn about your people. Kalar bowed her head slightly. I am honored to serve in this capacity. Their living quarters were adjacent to each other, a fact that became immediately apparent as they settled in. The station's cramped design meant that personal space was at a premium. On their first morning, Scott emerged from his quarters to find Kalar waiting outside his door. Good morning, Scott, she said, bowing deeply. How may I serve you today? Scott ran a hand through his hair, still groggy from sleep. Good morning, Kalar. You don't have to wait for me like this. I can take care of myself. Kalar's face fell. Have I displeased you? It is my duty to attend to your needs. No, you haven't displeased me, Scott said quickly. It's just, humans value their independence. We're not used to having someone serve us like this. Kalar's brow furrowed in confusion. But how do you show respect and maintain social order without service? Scott realized he was in over his head. Let's just go get some breakfast, okay? The station's communal dining area buzzed with activity as humans and Katarians alike gathered for their morning meal. Scott filled his tray with familiar foods, while Kalar selected an assortment of nutrient cubes that looked utterly unappetizing to human eyes. As they sat down, Kalar reached for Scott's utensils. Allow me to feed you, she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Scott's face flushed red as he noticed several nearby soldiers trying to stifle their laughter. That's really not necessary, he said, gently pushing her hand away. Kalar withdrew, looking hurt and confused. I do not understand. How am I to fulfill my debt if you will not allow me to serve you? Scott sighed, realizing that navigating this cultural minefield would be harder than he'd anticipated. Look, Kalar, we need to talk about what this arrangement means. On Earth, we don't have servants or slaves. Everyone is equal. Kalar's scales rippled, a sign Scott had come to associate with strong emotion. But without the ability to repay my debt, I am without honor. Surely you do not wish to shame me. Before Scott could respond, his comm unit buzzed. Sergeant Ross, report to Briefing Room 3 immediately. Scott arrived at the briefing room to find Colonel James Hartman, a stern-faced officer he recognized from previous operations. The colonel's presence on the station was unexpected and unsettling. Sergeant, Hartman said, his voice clipped, I hope you understand the importance of your position here. Scott stood at attention. Yes, sir. Hartman's eyes narrowed. We need actionable intelligence on Katarian military capabilities. Your relationship with the alien gives us a unique opportunity. I expect you to exploit it fully. Scott felt a knot form in his stomach. Sir, Kalar is here as part of a cultural exchange. She's not a military asset. Everything and everyone on this station is a potential asset, Sergeant, Hartman snapped. Don't let your personal feelings cloud your judgment. We're still at war, in case you've forgotten. As Scott left the briefing room, his mind raced. How could he balance his duty to his superiors with his growing respect for Kalar? The thought of using her cultural beliefs for military gain left a bitter taste in his mouth. Over the next few weeks, Scott and Kalar fell into an uneasy routine. Kalar eagerly shared information about Katarian society, believing she was helping to bridge the gap between their species. She taught Scott about their complex system of social debts and honors, revealing a culture far more nuanced than humans had initially believed. In Katarian society, every interaction carries weight, Kalar explained one evening as they sat in Scott's quarters. Debts of honor, of service, of knowledge. They all contribute to the fabric of our relationships. Scott listened intently, finding himself fascinated despite his reservations. It sounds complicated, he admitted. Kalar's scales shimmered with amusement. To us, your human concept of freedom is equally perplexing. How can one be truly free without the bonds of reciprocal obligation? As they spent more time together, Scott began to notice subtle changes in Kalar's behavior. She became more assertive, asking questions about human customs and beliefs. Her quick intelligence and adaptability impressed him, and he found himself looking forward to their conversations. Their growing bond was put to the test during a routine maintenance check of the station's life support systems. Scott was assisting the engineering team when alarms blared throughout the station. "We've got a critical malfunction in Sector 7, the lead engineer shouted. "Oxygen levels are dropping fast." Scott rushed to the affected area, finding Kalar already there, her scales pulsing with urgency. "The problem is in the filtration system," she said, pointing to a complex array of tubes and valves. "I recognize the design from our ships." Together they worked to repair the damage. Scott's strength and technical knowledge complemented Kalar's understanding of the system's intricacies. As the last connection was secured and oxygen levels stabilized, Scott realized how seamlessly they had worked as a team. Kalar turned to him, her eyes shining. "We did it, Scott! We saved the station!" Without thinking, Scott pulled her into a hug. Kalar stiffened for a moment, then relaxed into the embrace. It was a gesture that bridged their two worlds, a moment of shared triumph and connection. As they separated, Scott saw Dr. Chen watching them from the corridor, a thoughtful expression on his face. The scientist nodded approvingly before turning away. That night, as Scott lay in his bunk, he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. His relationship with Kalar had moved beyond the bounds of their initial arrangement, becoming something he couldn't quite define, but something he knew he wanted to protect. His comm unit chirped, shattering the moment of introspection. It was Colonel Hartman. "Sergeant Ross, my office, 0600 hours. We need to discuss your progress, or lack thereof, in gathering intelligence." Scott's stomach churned. He knew the colonel wouldn't be satisfied with the cultural insights he'd gained. Hartman wanted military secrets, and he wouldn't care about the ethical implications of how they were obtained. As Scott drifted into an uneasy sleep, he knew that soon he would face a choice, one that would test his loyalty, his principles, and his growing feelings for Kalar. The crossroads was approaching, and the path he chose would have consequences far beyond the confines of the Concordia. Scott's meeting with Colonel Hartman left him feeling hollow. The colonel's words echoed in his mind as he made his way back to his quarters. "I expect results, Sergeant. Real, actionable intelligence. Don't disappoint me." As he entered his room, Scott's eyes fell on a small, inconspicuous device sitting on his desk. The covert monitoring unit seemed to mock him with its presence. He picked it up, turning it over in his hands, feeling the weight of his decision. For a moment, he considered following orders. It would be easy to plant the device in Kalar's quarters during one of their conversations, but as he thought of Kalar's trust in him, her eagerness to share her culture, Scott knew he couldn't betray her. With a deep breath, Scott made his choice. He pocketed the device and left his quarters, heading for the station's waste disposal unit. As he walked, he felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. He was doing the right thing, but at what cost? Scott was so focused on his mission that he didn't notice the security camera tracking his movements. As he reached the disposal unit and prepared to jettison the device, a hand clamped down on his shoulder. "Sergeant Ross," a stern voice said, "you're going to need to come with us." Within hours, Scott found himself standing at attention in Colonel Hartman's office, his heart pounding as the colonel paced before him. Insubordination, destruction of military property, obstruction of intelligence gathering. Hartman listed off, his voice cold. "You're suspended from duty, effective immediately. Consider yourself lucky I'm not having you court-martialed." As Scott was escorted back to his quarters, now confined until further notice, he saw Kalar watching from a distance, her scales rippling with concern. News of Scott's suspension spread quickly through the station. Kalar, worried for her friend and confused by human military protocols, began to investigate. She used her growing familiarity with human technology to access station logs and communication channels. her quick mind piecing together fragments of information. Late one night, as Kalar sifted through encrypted transmissions, she stumbled upon something unexpected, a hidden channel using a blend of human and Ktarian encryption methods. As she worked to decode it, her eyes widened in shock. Meanwhile, Dr. Chen, sensing the growing tension on the station, launched a series of cultural exchange events. "We must not let misunderstanding drive us apart," he announced to a mixed crowd of humans and Ktarians. "Let us learn from each other, celebrate our differences, and find common ground." The events were a whirlwind of activity. Humans marveled at demonstrations of Ktarian energy manipulation techniques, while Ktarians watched in awe as humans showcased their adaptability in various physical challenges. Shared meals became opportunities for both species to explore new tastes and textures. During one such event, a shuttle demonstration, Scott noticed something amiss. Despite his suspension, his military training kept him alert. A Ktarian delegate was behaving oddly, moving towards the shuttle with purpose that didn't match his supposed role. Without hesitation, Scott sprang into action. He tackled the Ktarian just as the alien reached for a hidden device. They grappled on the ground, Scott's combat training giving him the edge. As security personnel rushed to the scene, Scott managed to subdue the saboteur. The incident sent shockwaves through the station. Security protocols were heightened, and both human and Ktarian forces began a thorough sweep for potential infiltrators. In the midst of the chaos, Kalar finally cracked the encoded transmissions. Her face paled as she read the messages, revealing a plot far more sinister than anyone had imagined. She knew she had to act fast. Kalar found Scott in his quarters, still under suspension, but now under looser restrictions due to his actions at the shuttle demonstration. "Scott," she said, her voice urgent, "I have discovered something terrible. We must go to your leaders immediately." Together, they made their way to the station's Joint Command Center, bypassing the normal chain of command. The evidence Kalar presented was irrefutable. Colonel Hartman had been collaborating with Ktarian separatists, planning an attack on the station using a deadly combination of human and Ktarian technology. The response was swift. Hartman was arrested along with several other conspirators from both species. As the immediate threat was neutralized, the station buzzed with a new energy. Humans and Ktarians worked side by side to strengthen defenses and root out any remaining separatist influence. In the days that followed, Scott found himself reinstated and commended for his actions. As he stood before a joint council of human and Ktarian leaders, he felt a sense of hope for the future. "Sergeant Ross," the human admiral said, "your actions have not only saved lives, but have opened new doors for cooperation between our species." The Ktarian representative nodded in agreement. "We propose the formation of a joint task force to address future threats, and we would like you, Sergeant Ross, to be part of it." As the meeting concluded, Scott's eyes met Kalar's across the room. She approached him, her scales shimmering with an emotion he couldn't quite place. "Scott," she said softly, "I have been thinking about our arrangement, about the life debt I owe you." Scott opened his mouth to speak, but Kalar gently raised a hand to stop him. "I have learned much about human concepts of freedom and choice," she continued, "and I have come to a decision. I wish to stay with you, not out of obligation, but because I choose to, because I value our friendship." Before Scott could respond, a commotion near the front of the room caught their attention. Dr. Chen was making an announcement, his face alight with excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen, humans and Ktarians," he said, "I am thrilled to announce a new joint exploration mission. We will be venturing into uncharted space, showcasing the very best of what our two species can accomplish together." As the room erupted in applause, Scott felt a tap on his shoulder. An officer handed him a data pad. "Congratulations, Sergeant Ross. You've been selected for the mission. You too, Kalar," he added with a nod to the Ktarian. Scott looked at Kalar, seeing his own mix of excitement and apprehension mirrored in her eyes. They were about to embark on a new adventure, one that would test not only their skills, but also their growing bond. As they left the command center together, stepping into an uncertain but promising future, Scott realized that their journey was just getting started. In fact, it was just beginning. The newly commissioned starship, Harmony, gleamed in the artificial light of the space station's docking bay. Its sleek hull bore the emblems of both Earth and Terria, a visual representation of the cooperation between the two species. Scott and Kalar stood side by side, gazing at the vessel that would be their home for the foreseeable future. "It's beautiful," Kalar said, her scales shimmering with excitement. Scott nodded in agreement. "A perfect blend of our technologies. I can't wait to see what she can do." As they boarded the ship, they were greeted by Captain Elena Rodriguez, a tall woman with piercing green eyes and an air of quiet authority. "Welcome aboard, Sergeant Ross. Specialist Kalar, you'll be part of our primary exploration team. We're headed to an uncharted system on the fringes of Catarian space. Be ready for anything." The next few weeks were a flurry of activity as the crew of the Harmony worked to integrate their different approaches and methodologies. Scott found himself constantly amazed by the Tarians' efficiency and precision, while Kalar marveled at the humans' adaptability and creative problem-solving. As they approached their destination, the ship's sensors detected an anomaly. "Captain," the science officer called out, "we're picking up a large structure in orbit around the system's gas giant." All eyes turned to the main view screen as the object came into focus. It was a massive space station, its architecture unlike anything they had ever seen before. Ancient and mysterious, it hung silently in the void, waiting to be explored. "Sergeant Ross, Specialist Kalar, prepare your team for a closer look," Captain Rodriguez ordered. "Take a shuttle and investigate." As they approached the station in their small craft, Scott couldn't shake a feeling of unease. "Something's not right with the shuttle's propulsion," he muttered, his hands dancing over the controls. Kalar leaned in, her eyes narrowing as she analyzed the readouts. "The alien structure is emitting an unusual energy field. It's interfering with our systems." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the shuttle. "We've lost main propulsion," Scott shouted, fighting to maintain control. "Kalar, I need options." Working in perfect sync, they managed to guide the failing shuttle towards the station's surface. Scott's expert piloting, combined with Kalar's rapid calculations and understanding of the alien energy field, allowed them to make a rough but survivable landing. As the dust settled, Scott and Kalar exchanged a look of relief. "Nice flying," Kalar said, her scales pulsing with admiration. "Couldn't have done it without you," Scott replied, unbuckling his harness. "Come on, let's see where we've landed." The team cautiously exited the shuttle, finding themselves in a vast, dimly lit chamber. The air was stale but breathable. As they explored, they discovered room after room filled with strange devices and incomprehensible data displays. "This place, it's incredible," one of the human scientists whispered in awe. "The advancements here could revolutionize everything we know about science and technology." Kalar nodded, her eyes wide as she examined a nearby console. The potential applications for medicine, energy production, space travel, it's beyond anything we could have imagined. As they made their way deeper into the station, Scott couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder mixed with caution. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," he warned. "We still need to find a way to contact the Harmony and get off this station." They eventually reached what appeared to be a central control room. Holographic displays flickered to life as they entered, bathing the room in an eerie blue glow. Scott approached what looked like the main interface, his hand hovering over the controls. "Wait!" Kalar called out, but it was too late. Scott's fingers brushed against the alien surface, and suddenly the room came alive with activity. Lights flashed and a low hum reverberated through the station. Then, with a series of metallic clangs, blast doors slammed shut, sealing them inside. "What happened?" Scott asked, backing away from the console. Kalar's scales pulsed with concern as she examined the now active displays. "You've triggered some kind of defense system. We're locked in." Outside the station, aboard the Harmony, Captain Rodriguez paced the bridge. "Any word from the away team?" she asked, her voice tense. "Negative, Captain," the communications officer replied. "We've lost all contact." Before Rodriguez could respond, the tactical officer called out, "Captain, multiple ships approaching at high speed. They're not responding to hails." Rodriguez's eyes narrowed as she recognized the configuration of the incoming vessels. "The Zorn Consortium," she muttered. "Red alert. All hands to battle stations. Back on the station, Kalar worked feverishly to decipher the alien language on the control interfaces. Scott stood beside her, ready to assist in any way he could. "I think I'm making progress," Kalar said, her voice strained with concentration. "This station, it's not just a repository of knowledge. It's a weapon." Scott's eyebrows shot up. "A weapon? Can we use it to defend ourselves?" Keller's scales flickered with uncertainty. "Possibly, but it's complex. The system seems to require input from two different physiologies, almost as if it was designed for cooperation between species." As they worked to unravel the mysteries of the station's defenses, the battle outside intensified. The Harmony, despite its advanced technology, was outnumbered by the Zorn fleet. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the station's newly reactivated communication system. "Sergeant Ross, Specialist Kalar, if you can hear me, we need that station operational now. The Zorn are after its technology, and we can't hold them off much longer." Scott and Kalar shared a determined look. "We can do this," Scott said, placing his hand on the alien console. Kalar nodded, her scales shimmering with willpower as she placed her hand next to his. Together. As their hands touched the alien surface, a surge of energy coursed through them. The station hummed to life, its ancient systems awakening after millennia of dormancy. Scott and Kalar found their minds merging with the station's consciousness, their unique partnership becoming the key to unlocking its full potential. Outside, the Zorn fleet pressed their attack, unaware of the ancient power about to be unleashed against them. The fate of the exploration team, the Harmony, and perhaps the future of humanitarian relations hung in the balance as Scott and Kalar worked to master the station's defenses. In that moment, as two species joined forces to face an unknown threat, the true potential of their alliance began to unfold. Scott and Kalar's hands remained firmly pressed against the alien console, their bodies rigid as energy surged through them. The station hummed louder, its ancient systems awakening after eons of slumber. "It's working!" Scott gasped, his voice strained. "I can feel the station responding to us." Kalar's scales pulsed rapidly, her eyes wide with concentration. "The defenses are coming online. We need to direct them against the Zorn fleet." As their minds merged with the station's consciousness, Scott and Kalar found themselves immersed in a sea of information. Countless symbols and alien concepts flooded their awareness, threatening to overwhelm them. But their unique partnership allowed them to navigate this mental maelstrom, guiding the station's systems with a combination of human intuition and Qatarian precision. Outside, the Harmony rocked under the Zorn's relentless assault. Captain Rodriguez gripped her command chair, her fingers tightening. "Shields at 30%. We can't take much more of this." Suddenly, the space around the ancient station shimmered. A massive energy shield erupted outward, engulfing both the station and the Harmony. The Zorn weapons fire splashed harmlessly against its surface, unable to penetrate. "Shields holding," the tactical officer reported, his voice filled with amazement. "The Zorn fleet's attacks are having no effect." Rodriguez allowed herself a small smile. "Now it's our turn. All weapons. Target the lead Zorn vessel. Fire." The Harmony's advanced weaponry, a blend of human and Qatarian technology, lashed out at the enemy fleet. Caught off guard by the sudden shift in the battle, the Zorn ships scrambled to regroup. Back on the station, Scott and Kalar fought to maintain their connection with the alien systems. Sweat beaded on Scott's forehead, while Kalar's scales had taken on a pale, strained hue. "We need to keep the defenses active," Kalar said through gritted teeth. "The Harmony needs time to drive them back." Scott nodded, pushing through his exhaustion. "Together, we can do this. Just a little longer." Their mental link deepened, allowing them to work in perfect synchronization. They fine-tuned the station's defenses, adjusting the shield's frequency to counter the Zorn's attempts to breach it. The battle raged on, but with the protection of the station's shield and the Harmony's renewed offensive, the tide quickly turned. One by one, the Zorn ships broke off their attack, retreating into the depths of space. As the last enemy vessel disappeared from sensors, Scott and Kalar finally released their grip on the console. The effort had taken its toll. They collapsed to the floor, their bodies drained from the intense mental and physical strain. The rest of the exploration team rushed to their side. "We need to get them to the medical bay," one of the human scientists said urgently. As they were carried through the station's winding corridors, Scott drifted in and out of consciousness. He caught glimpses of strange, pulsating lights and heard the hum of unfamiliar machinery. When he finally came to, he found himself lying on a smooth, contoured surface that seemed to mold itself to his body. Beside him, Kalar stirred, her scales slowly regaining their normal luster. A tall, elegant Tarian woman stood over them, her hands moving deftly over a holographic display. "Welcome back," the woman said, her voice carrying a hint of awe. "I'm Dr. Ilara, Chief Medical Officer of the Harmony. You've been unconscious for several hours." Scott tried to sit up but found his body uncooperative. "The station, the Zorn..." Dr. Ilara gently pushed him back down. "Everything's under control. The Zorn fleet has been driven off thanks to your actions. Now please lie still. This alien medical technology is fascinating, but I'm still learning how to use it properly." As Scott relaxed, he became aware of a strange sensation in the back of his mind. It was as if he could sense Kalar's presence, not just physically, but mentally. He turned his head to look at her and found her staring back at him, her eyes wide with the same realization. "You feel it too?" Kalar asked softly. Scott nodded. "It's like, I can sense what you're feeling. How is this possible?" Dr. Ilara looked up from her display, her interest piqued. "Fascinating. It seems your interaction with the station's systems has had some unexpected side effects. I'll need to run more tests to understand the full extent of these changes." As they recovered, Scott and Kalar learned of the discoveries made by the rest of the team. The station's vast database held secrets beyond their wildest imaginations, including information on the early evolutionary stages of both humans and Catarians. Captain Rodriguez's voice came through the station's communication system. "Sergeant Ross, Specialist Kalar, I hope you're feeling better. We have a situation developing up here. Several ships have just arrived in the system, including a Catarian science vessel, the KSS Vorna. Their commander is requesting to speak with you, Kalar. He says, he's your father." Kalar's scales rippled with a mix of emotions that Scott could now sense: surprise, anxiety, and a touch of defiance. She took a deep breath and responded, "Thank you, Captain. We'll be there shortly." As they made their way to the station's command center, Scott and Kalar found their new mental connection allowing them to work even more efficiently. They instinctively understood each other's movements and intentions, navigating the alien corridors with ease. Upon reaching the command center, they were greeted by the imposing holographic image of Admiral Thoran, Kalar's father. His scales were a deep, authoritative blue, and his eyes narrowed as he took in the sight of his daughter standing shoulder to shoulder with a human. "Kalar," the Admiral said, his voice stern, "I trust you have a good explanation for this situation." Before Kalar could respond, the station's systems suddenly sprang to life around them. Holographic displays flickered into existence, showing a complex series of calculations and star charts. Scott and Kalar moved in unison, their enhanced connection allowing them to interpret the alien data with surprising speed. "The station," Scott said, his voice filled with urgency. "It's powering up its engines. It's preparing to jump." Kalar's scales pulsed with alarm as she realized the implications. "Father, Captain Rodriguez, you need to move your ships back immediately. The station is generating a massive gravitational field." But it was too late. The ancient engines of the station roared to life, creating a vortex of energy that engulfed both the Harmony and the Vorna. Scott and Kalar worked frantically to understand the navigation systems, their minds racing in tandem. "We can't stop it," Kalar said, her voice tight with concentration. "But we can at least see where it's taking us." With seconds to spare, they managed to decipher the coordinates locked into the station's navigation system. Scott quickly transmitted the data to both ships. "Captain, Admiral, we're about to make a jump to these coordinates. It's far beyond known space." The station shuddered, and a blinding light engulfed them. Scott instinctively reached out, gripping Kalar's hand as they were thrust into the unknown. Their enhanced connection blazed with shared emotions, fear, excitement, and a deep, unspoken bond that had grown between them. As the light faded, they found themselves staring out at an alien sky filled with unfamiliar stars. The Harmony and the Vorna hung nearby, their crews no doubt as disoriented as they were. Admiral Thorne's hologram flickered back to life, his expression a mix of anger and awe. "By the ancient seas of Kataria, where have you taken us?" Scott and Kalar exchanged a look, their mental link brimming with a shared sense of adventure and trepidation. They turned to face the Admiral, the Captain, and the unknown expanse of space before them, ready to embark on the next phase of their incredible journey. The station shuddered as it settled into its new position, the unfamiliar stars twinkling through the viewports. Admiral Thorne's hologram flickered, his scales shifting to a deep indigo of concern. "Kalar, what in the name of the first egg have you done?" Before Kalar could respond, the station's sensors erupted with activity. Holographic displays materialized around them, painting a stark picture of their surroundings. "Sir," Scott addressed both the Admiral and Captain Rodriguez, "we're detecting a massive debris field. It's incredible." The display zoomed in, revealing a vast expanse of twisted metal and shattered hulls. Derelict vessels of various sizes and designs floated silently in the void, some as large as small moons. Interspersed among them were structures of unknown purpose, their alien architecture hinting at a civilization far beyond current understanding. Captain Rodriguez leaned forward, her eyes wide. "Are you seeing this, Admiral? This technology, it's like nothing we've ever encountered." Admiral Thorne's expression softened from anger to awe. "Indeed, it appears we've stumbled upon something far greater than ourselves." Scott and Kalar exchanged a glance, their enhanced connection buzzing with shared excitement and trepidation. Without a word, they moved in perfect synchronization to a nearby console, their hands flying over the controls. "Captain," Keller reported, her scales shimmering with intensity, "preliminary scans indicate that this debris field contains technology far beyond our current capabilities. The energy signatures, they're off the charts." Scott nodded, adding, "And there's more. The design of these structures matches the architecture of the station we're on. I think we've found the civilization that built it." A hush fell over the command center as the implications sank in. Captain Rodriguez was the first to break the silence. "Sergeant Ross, Specialist Kalar, I want you to lead an away team to investigate. Find us a large, intact structure and see what you can learn." Admiral Thorne's hologram pulsed with concern. "Captain, I must object. We don't know what dangers lurk in that debris field." "With all due respect, Admiral," Scott interjected, surprising himself with his boldness, "Kalar and I are uniquely qualified for this mission. Our connection to the station's systems gives us an edge in understanding this technology." Kalar nodded, her scales rippling with dedication. "He's right, Father. We're the best chance we have of unraveling this mystery." The Admiral's expression hardened, but he relented. "Very well, but be careful, both of you." Within the hour, Scott and Kalar led a mixed team of human and Katarian specialists towards a massive, intact structure floating at the edge of the debris field. Their shuttle weaved through the graveyard of alien ships, the silence of space belying the tension within. As they approached the structure, its surface seemed to come alive. Patterns of light danced across its hull, responding to their presence. "It's scanning us," one of the Katarian scientists observed, her scales flickering nervously. Scott felt a familiar tingle in the back of his mind. He glanced at Kalar, seeing his own realization mirrored in her eyes. Without a word, they both reached out, placing their hands on the shuttle's controls. The connection that had formed between them on the station flared to life once more. Through it, they could sense the alien structure's security systems, a maze of energy fields and data streams that would have been impenetrable to normal technology. "We can do this," Scott said softly, more to Kalar than anyone else. Together, they guided the shuttle through the invisible maze, their minds working in perfect harmony to anticipate and counter each security measure. The rest of the team watched in amazement as the structure's defenses parted before them like water. They docked in a cavernous hangar, the shuttle settling gently onto an alien landing pad. As the team disembarked, Scott and Kalar took point, their enhanced senses alert for any danger. The interior of the structure was a marvel of engineering, with sweeping arches of an unknown metal and pulsing conduits of energy running through the walls. As they explored deeper, they encountered increasingly complex systems and devices. "Look at this," one of the human scientists called out, gesturing to a massive computer core. "The processing power of this system alone could revolutionize our understanding of quantum computing." Kalar approached another device, her scales shimmering with excitement. "And this? I believe it's an advanced faster-than-light drive. The principles it's based on, they could reduce our travel times by orders of magnitude." As the team cataloged their discoveries, Scott felt a nagging sense of unease. He turned to Kalar, seeing his concern reflected in her eyes. "We need to keep moving. Something tells me we haven't seen the most important part yet." They pressed deeper into the structure, their path illuminated by the soft glow of alien technology. Suddenly, the corridor opened up into a vast chamber, its walls lined with rows upon rows of sleek metallic pods. "Stasis chambers," Kalar breathed, her scales paling in awe. Scott approached one of the pods, wiping away a layer of condensation. Through the frosted surface, he could make out a humanoid figure, its features alien yet hauntingly familiar. "They're alive," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Before they could process this discovery, alarms blared throughout the structure. The team's communicators crackled to life with Captain Rodriguez's urgent voice. "Away team, return to the shuttle immediately. Long-range scans have detected an incoming fleet. Unknown origin, but their ships match the design of the derelict vessels. ETA 15 minutes. Scott and Kalar shared a look of commitment. They knew they couldn't leave, not with this discovery, not with the possibility of awakening the creators of this incredible technology. "Captain," Scott responded, his voice steady, "we've found stasis pods with living beings inside. We can't abandon them. Request permission to attempt revival." There was a moment of tense silence before the captain's voice returned. "You have 10 minutes, Sergeant. Make them count." Scott turned to Kalar, their enhanced connection thrumming with shared purpose. "Let's do this," he said, and they set to work. Their fingers flew over the alien controls, their minds working in tandem to decipher the complex awakening process. The rest of the team stood back, watching in awe as human and Tarian worked together with impossible synchronicity. As the final seconds ticked away, one of the pods hissed open. A figure stirred within, slowly sitting up. She was humanoid, with iridescent skin and eyes that seemed to hold the depth of galaxies. "Welcome back," Scott said softly, offering a hand to the alien woman. She looked at him, then at Kalar, a smile of recognition spreading across her face. "You've returned," she said, her voice melodic and filled with warmth. "Just as we hoped you would." As Scott helped her from the pod, Kalar asked, "Who are you? What is this place?" The alien woman stood, her movements graceful despite millennia of stasis. "I am Zara," she said, her gaze taking in the mixed team before her. "And you, my children, have finally come home to your creators. We are the progenitors, and we have been waiting a very long time for this day." The team stared in shock as Zara's words sank in, but before they could ask any more questions, the structure shuddered. The incoming fleet had arrived, and with it, the promise of an epic confrontation that would shape the future of not just humanity in the Catarians, but of all life in the galaxy. Galaxy! The progenitor structure shuddered as the incoming fleet's weapons impacted its ancient shields. "We're out of time," Scott said, his eyes meeting Zara's. "How do we defend ourselves?" Zara's otherworldly eyes flickered with tenacity. "There is a way, but it requires great sacrifice." She led them deeper into the structure, past rows of stasis pods, to a chamber dominated by a massive crystalline construct. "This is our last line of defense," Zara explained, her melodic voice tinged with urgency. "A superweapon capable of neutralizing any threat, but it requires a significant energy source to activate." Kalar's scales rippled with understanding. "Our life force," she said softly. Zara nodded. "The weapon was designed to draw upon the energy of progenitors. But you two, with your unique connection to our technology, may be able to power it." Scott and Kalar exchanged a glance, their enhanced link buzzing with shared dedication. Without a word, they stepped forward, placing their hands on the crystal's smooth surface. The effect was immediate and intense. Energy crackled around them, arcing between their bodies and the superweapon. Scott gritted his teeth against the pain, feeling as if every cell in his body was on fire. Beside him, Kalar's scales pulsed rapidly, her face contorted in agony. As the energy flowed from them into the weapon, their mental link exploded with newfound intensity. Suddenly, Scott wasn't just feeling Kalar's pain, he was experiencing her memories, her emotions, her very essence. He saw her childhood on Kataria, felt the weight of her father's expectations, and understood the depth of her dedication to her people. In turn, Kalar was immersed in Scott's past. She lived through his struggles growing up on a crowded Earth, felt his yearning for the stars, and experienced the pride and purpose he found in the military. Their merged consciousness allowed them to better control the flow of energy. Together, they guided the power through the intricate pathways of the superweapon, their shared knowledge of progenitor technology proving crucial. The crystal pulsed with increasing intensity, bathing the chamber in a blinding light. Scott and Kalar's bodies began to fade, becoming translucent as more of their life force was drawn into the weapon. Just as it seemed they would be completely consumed, the superweapon reached critical mass. A massive wave of energy erupted from the structure, sweeping across the battlefield. The attacking ships stuttered and went dark, their systems completely fried by the pulse. "Now!" Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm. "All ships engage!" The Harmony and the Vorna led the charge, their weapons tearing through the defenseless enemy fleet. Within minutes, the battle was over, the threat neutralized. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Scott and Kalar collapsed to the floor, their bodies pale and barely substantial. Zara knelt beside them, her iridescent skin glowing with concern. "Medical teams to the progenitor structure immediately," Admiral Thoran's voice boomed through the comm. "My daughter needs help." As the mixed human and Katarian medical teams rushed to stabilize Scott and Kalar, Zara provided access to progenitor medical technology. The teams worked frantically, combining their knowledge with the advanced alien tech to keep the two heroes alive. Hours passed as Scott and Kalar hovered between life and death. Their physical bodies had been ravaged by the energy drain, but their minds remained linked, sustaining each other in a shared dreamscape of memories and emotions. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, their condition stabilized. As Scott's eyes fluttered open, he found Admiral Thoran standing over him, the Katarian's scales a mix of relief and gratitude. "You saved us all," Thoran said softly. "Both of you." He turned to Kalar, who was slowly regaining consciousness. "Daughter, I release you from your life debt to Sergeant Ross. Your actions have gone far beyond any obligation." Kalar's scales shimmered weakly with emotion. "Father, No," Thorne interrupted gently. "Your bond with Scott has become something far greater than our traditions. I see that now." As Scott and Kalar recovered, Zara gathered the human and Tarian leadership to reveal the true nature of their enemy. "The fleet you faced was not crewed by living beings," she explained. "They were ships controlled by an artificial intelligence, created eons ago by a species that rivaled the progenitors." Captain Rodriguez leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "An AI? Why would it attack us?" "This AI was programmed with a single directive, to eradicate all organic life in the galaxy," Zara said gravely. "It views biological entities as a threat to its own existence." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled leaders. Admiral Thoran's scales darkened with concern. If this was just one fleet, there could be more out there. "Indeed," Zara nodded. "The threat is nowhere near the end. That is why we must stand united, humans, Katarians, and progenitors, to face this existential danger." As discussions of alliance and strategy filled the room, Scott and Kalar were subjected to a battery of tests. Scientists marveled at the changes wrought by their interaction with the superweapon. "It's extraordinary," a human scientist explained, poring over holographic readouts. "The energy has fundamentally altered your physiology. You're not quite human anymore. Sergeant Ross and Specialist Kalar, you're not fully Katarian either." "What are we then?" Scott asked, his hand instinctively finding Kalar's. "Something new," the scientist said with a mixture of awe and excitement. "A hybrid of both species, infused with progenitor energy. Your enhanced mental link appears to be permanent, and there's no telling what other abilities you might develop." As news of their condition spread, reactions were mixed. Many saw Scott and Kalar as the key to unlocking more progenitor technology and fostering deeper interspecies cooperation. Others, however, viewed them with suspicion and fear, seeing their hybrid state as a threat to the purity of both human and Katarian races. Despite the controversy surrounding them, Scott and Kalar were appointed to lead a new joint task force. Their mission, to explore the galaxy, seeking out other advanced civilizations and progenitor outposts to build a coalition against the AI threat. As they prepared for their mission, tensions continued to simmer. Protests erupted on both human and Katarian worlds, with some calling for Scott and Kalar to be quarantined or studied, while others hailed them as the next step in evolution. Amid the chaos, Scott and Kalar found solace in each other and their newfound abilities. Their enhanced link allowed them to communicate without words, to share strength when one was weak, and to understand each other on a level that transcended normal relationships. Finally, the day of departure arrived. Scott and Kalar stood before their new ship, a sleek vessel that combined the best of human, Katarian, and progenitor technologies. As they prepared to board, Admiral Zorn approached them one last time. "The path ahead of you is uncertain," he said, his scales shimmering with a complex mix of emotions. "But I have faith that together, you will find a way to unite us all against this threat." Scott nodded, feeling Kalar's willpower mingling with his own. As they turned to board their ship, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Not as human and Katarian, but as something entirely new. New. As the airlock hissed shut behind them, Scott and Kalar shared a moment of silent understanding. Their new ship, christened the Nexus, represented the pinnacle of combined human, Katarian, and progenitor technologies. Its sleek lines and advanced systems held the promise of bridging gaps between species and exploring the farthest reaches of space. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm system. "Nexus, you are clear for departure. Godspeed and good hunting." Scott settled into the command chair, feeling the familiar hum of the ship's systems through his enhanced connection. Kalar took her place at the tactical station, her scales shimmering with anticipation. "All systems online," reported Lieutenant Tarek, the ship's engineer. His fingers danced across the holographic interface, monitoring the complex interplay of technologies. "Initiating faster-than-light jump in 3, 2, 1. The Nexus surged forward, reality stretching around it as it entered hyperspace. For a moment, everything seemed perfect. Then, without warning, alarms blared throughout the ship. "What's happening?" Scott demanded, gripping the arms of his chair as the Nexus shuddered violently. Tarek's voice was tight with tension. "The propulsion system is destabilizing. We're being forced out of hyperspace." With a sickening lurch, the Nexus tore back into normal space. Inertial dampeners strained to compensate, and crew members were thrown from their stations. As the chaos subsided, an eerie silence fell over the bridge. "Status report," Scott ordered, helping a dazed ensign back to her feet. Kalar's fingers flew over her console. All crew accounted for. Minor injuries reported. Hull integrity at 97%. She paused, her scales darkening with concern. "Scott, our position? We're far off course. This star system doesn't match any in our database." Scott felt a mixture of dread and excitement through their shared link. They had prepared for the unexpected, but this was beyond anything they had anticipated. "Tarek, what happened to the propulsion system?" The engineer's face appeared on the main view screen, streaked with sweat and grime. "It's the integration of the different technologies, sir. There was an unforeseen reaction between the progenitor energy matrix and the Katarian quantum stabilizers. It's going to take time to diagnose and repair. Scott nodded, processing the information. Do what you can. In the meantime, Kalar, what can you tell me about our current location? Kalar's eyes narrowed as she studied the sensor readings. There's a habitable planet in this system, Scott, and there are definite signs of advanced civilization, energy signatures unlike anything we've encountered before. The bridge crew exchanged glances of mingled apprehension and curiosity. Scott stood, his decision made. Prepare a landing party. We need to investigate this planet. If there's an advanced civilization here, they might be potential allies against the AI threat. Within the hour, Scott led a small team to the planet's surface, Kalar at his side. As they emerged from the shuttle, they found themselves on the outskirts of a gleaming city. Soaring spires of an iridescent material stretched towards the sky, while vehicles of impossible design flitted between them. Incredible, breathed Lieutenant Chen, the team's xenobiologist. The level of technology here, it's at least on par with our alliance, maybe even beyond. Before Scott could respond, a group of the planet's inhabitants appeared before them, seemingly out of thin air. They were tall, slender beings with skin that shimmered like oil on water. Their eyes, large and multifaceted, regarded the newcomers with evident wariness. Scott stepped forward, hands raised in a universal gesture of peace. "We come in friendship," he began, hoping the universal translator would convey his sincerity. "I am Sergeant Scott Ross of the United Earth-Katarian Alliance." One of the aliens moved forward, its movements fluid and graceful. "I am Krax, leader of the Zendi people," it said, its voice a melodious hum. "Your arrival is unexpected. We have long chosen to remain apart from galactic affairs." Kalar joined Scott, her scales rippling with a mix of emotions that Scott could feel through their link. "We apologize for our intrusion," she said. "Our ship experienced a malfunction that brought us to your system. But perhaps this meeting was meant to be." Krax's multifaceted eyes focused on Scott and Kalar, a flicker of curiosity passing through them. "You two, you are different from the others. Your energy signatures are unlike anything we have encountered." Scott nodded, seeing an opportunity. "We are the result of a unique blending of human and Katarian physiologies, enhanced by ancient progenitor technology. Our alliance represents the power of cooperation between different species." Krax seemed to consider this for a moment. "Intriguing. Perhaps we have been too hasty in our isolation. Come, let us discuss this further in more comfortable surroundings." As they followed Krax into the heart of the Zendi city, Scott and Kalar exchanged a glance of cautious optimism. They had come seeking repairs and found a potential new ally. But as they entered a vast chamber filled with Zendi officials, they knew the real challenge was just beginning. The fate of their mission, and perhaps the galaxy itself, would hinge on their ability to convince these isolated people to join the fight against a threat they had yet to face. Scott took a deep breath, feeling Kalar's steady presence through their link. Together, they stepped forward to address the Zendi leadership, ready to make their case for unity in the face of the looming AI menace. Threat. As Scott finished his impassioned speech to the Zendi leadership, a sudden tremor shook the chamber. Alarms blared and holographic displays flickered to life, revealing a chilling sight. "Sergeant Ross," Lieutenant Chen's voice crackled over the comm, urgent and strained. "Long-range sensors have detected a massive fleet approaching at high speed. It's the AI." Scott's blood ran cold. He exchanged a glance with Kalar, their shared link humming with a mixture of dread and perseverance. "How many ships?" he asked, already dreading the answer. "Thousands," Chen replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Far more than anything we've encountered before." Krax's multifaceted eyes widened, reflecting the holographic display of the incoming armada. "This threat you spoke of? It's real, and it's here." Scott nodded grimly. "We need to act fast. Krax, can you mobilize your forces? We'll need every ship we can muster." The Zendi leader hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "We will stand with you. Our isolation ends today." As the chamber erupted into a flurry of activity, Scott turned to Kalar. "We need to warn the Alliance. If we don't stop this fleet here, there won't be a galaxy left to save. They raced back to the Nexus, the ship's sleek form a beacon of hope in the face of overwhelming odds. As they boarded, Scott barked orders to the crew. Tarek, I need maximum power to the communications array. We're sending out an emergency transmission. The engineer's fingers flew across the console, rerouting power and optimizing systems. Ready, sir. The Xendi tech we integrated is giving us a significant boost. Scott took a deep breath and opened a channel. This is Sergeant Scott Ross of the Nexus to Alliance headquarters. We have detected a massive AI fleet approaching our position. Request immediate reinforcements. I repeat, this is not a drill. We are facing an extinction-level threat. As the message streamed out faster than light, Kalar manned the tactical station. Her scales rippled with tension as she assessed their options. Scott, even with the Xendi ships, we're vastly outnumbered. We can't hope to defeat this fleet in direct combat. Scott nodded, feeling the weight of command settling on his shoulders. We're not trying to win. We just need to buy time for reinforcements to arrive. He turned to address the crew, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Listen up, everyone. We're about to engage in a fighting retreat. Our job is to slow that fleet down and survive long enough for help to get here. It's going to be tough, but I know this crew can handle it. As the AI fleet entered the system, the Nexus sprang into action. Scott and Kalar's hybrid consciousness melded with the ship's systems, allowing them to push the vessel to its absolute limits. They danced through the enemy formation, striking with pinpoint accuracy before darting away. Targeting lead vessel's propulsion systems, Keller announced, her voice calm despite the chaos around them. A barrage of energy beams lanced out from the Nexus, striking the AI ship with devastating precision. Direct hit, Chen called out. Enemy vessel disabled. But for every small victory, the sheer numbers of the AI fleet threatened to overwhelm them. Explosions rocked the Nexus as enemy fire found its mark. Hull integrity at 78% and falling, Tarek reported, his voice strained. We can't take much more of this. Scott gritted his teeth, feeling Kalar's grit mingling with his own. Keep us in the fight, Tarek. We just need to hold on a little longer. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the ship. Alarms blared as smoke filled the bridge. Direct hit to the engine room, Tarek shouted over the din. Radiation levels are critical. We need to shut it down or we'll lose containment. Without hesitation, Tarek rushed towards the engine room. I'll handle it myself, he called back. The radiation levels are too high for anyone else. Tarek, no, Scott yelled. But the engineer had already disappeared into the smoke-filled corridor. As Tarek fought to keep the ship operational, Scott and Kalar coordinated their attacks with the Xendi forces. Their hybrid abilities allowed them to process tactical information at unprecedented speeds, giving them a crucial edge against the adaptive AI. Just as it seemed they could hold out no longer, space itself seemed to tear open. A massive fleet of Alliance ships burst into the system, led by the imposing form of the KSS Vorna. This is Admiral Thorin, a familiar voice crackled over the comm. We received your distress call, Sergeant Ross. The cavalry has arrived. Relief washed over the bridge crew, but Scott knew the real fight was just beginning. Admiral, we're transmitting tactical data now. The AI fleet is unlike anything we've faced before. As the battle raged on, Scott and Kalar's hybrid consciousness became the linchpin of the Alliance's strategy. They coordinated movements across hundreds of ships, identifying weaknesses in the AI's formation and exploiting them with ruthless efficiency. But even as they gained ground, Scott could feel the strain on their hybrid physiology. Every tactical decision, every calculated risk, pushed their merged consciousness to its limits. Then in a blinding flash of light, a new player entered the fray. A sleek, otherworldly ship appeared in the heart of the battle. Scott's comm crackled to life, and a familiar voice filled the bridge. Scott, Kalar, this is Zara. We've brought reinforcements, and a weapon that could turn the tide, but we'll need your help to use it. As Zara's ship approached, Scott and Kalar exchanged a look. They knew what had to be done, regardless of the risk to themselves. The future of the cosmos hung in the balance, and they were the key to unlocking the power that could save it all. Bring us in, Helm, Scott ordered, his voice resolute. It's time to end this. This. Scott's voice was steady as he guided the Nexus towards Zara's ship. The battle raged around them, but a strange calm settled over the bridge as they approached their destiny. As they docked, Scott and Kalar felt a surge of energy coursing through their hybrid bodies. Zara met them at the airlock, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "We don't have much time," she said, leading them to the heart of her vessel. In the center of a vast chamber stood a pulsing crystalline structure, its facets reflecting the chaos of the battle outside. "This is the Nexus core," Zara explained. "It's a conduit to the full power of the progenitors. With your hybrid physiology, you can channel its energy to neutralize the AI threat." Scott and Kalar exchanged a glance, their shared link humming with anticipation and trepidation. They stepped forward, placing their hands on the crystal. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Energy surged through them, their consciousness expanding beyond the confines of their bodies. In that moment, they could see the entire battlefield, every ship, every weapon, every line of code driving the AI fleet. With a thought, they reached out, their hybrid minds interfacing directly with the AI's network. The AI recoiled, its collective consciousness sensing the intrusion. It lashed out with everything it had, unleashing a barrage of energy weapons and launching waves of fighter drones. But Scott and Kalar stood firm, their merged consciousness becoming a bulwark against the onslaught. They began to push back, not with weapons, but with understanding. They showed the AI the beauty of organic life, the power of diversity, the strength found in cooperation. The battle raged on both in physical space and the digital realm. Alliance ships clashed with AI vessels, while Scott and Kalar's hybrid minds grappled with the AI's core programming. Hours passed in the blink of an eye. The strain on their bodies was immense, but Scott and Kalar persevered. Gradually, they began to make headway. The AI's attacks became less coordinated, its responses slower. Finally, with a surge of effort that threatened to overwhelm their hybrid physiology, Scott and Kalar broke through the AI's final defenses. They rewrote its core directives, replacing the drive for domination with a desire for coexistence and mutual growth. The effect rippled across the battlefield. AI ships stopped firing, their weapons powering down. The Alliance fleet, battered but unbroken, watched in awe as their implacable enemy stood down. Scott and Kalar collapsed, their bodies pushed to the limit. As consciousness faded, they shared a final thought through their link. They had done it. The galaxy was safe. Weeks passed in a blur of medical bays and debriefings. Scott and Kalar's recovery progressed at an astonishing rate, their hybrid bodies adapting and healing faster than anyone had anticipated. As they regained their strength, they found their abilities had grown. Their mental link was stronger, their physical capabilities enhanced beyond their previous limits. Admiral Zorn visited them as they convalesced, his usually stern features softened with pride. "You've done the impossible," he said, "but our work isn't finished. We need to ensure this peace lasts." Scott nodded, feeling Kalar's agreement through their link. "The AI is no longer a threat, but it's still out there. We need to integrate it into our society, show it the benefits of cooperation firsthand." "Exactly," Thoran said, "and we believe you two are the best equipped to lead that effort. Your unique nature makes you ideal ambassadors between organic and artificial life." In the days that followed, Scott and Kalar threw themselves into their new role. They worked tirelessly, mediating disputes, fostering understanding, and laying the groundwork for a new era of galactic cooperation. Their efforts culminated in a grand ceremony on Earth. Representatives from all allied species gathered to celebrate their victory and newfound unity. Scott and Kalar stood before the assembled crowd, their hands clasped, a living symbol of the power of diversity and cooperation. Admiral Zorn stepped forward, his voice ringing out across the assembly. "Today, we not only celebrate our victory, but also the union that made it possible. In recognition of their service and the strength of their bond, I officially acknowledge the union of Scott Ross and Kalar, with all the rights and privileges thereof." A cheer went up from the crowd. Humans, Katarians, Zendi, and even reformed AI units joined in the celebration. Scott and Kalar shared a look of deep affection, their link humming with joy and a sense of fulfilled purpose. As the ceremony wound down, Scott and Kaler found themselves looking out over the assembled crowd. The sight of so many different species coexisting peacefully filled them with hope for the future. "We've come so far," Kalar said, her scales shimmering with emotion. Scott nodded, squeezing her hand. "But there's still so much to explore, so many new civilizations to meet." They shared a moment of understanding, their hybrid minds perfectly in sync. Without needing to speak, they knew their next step. The next day, they stood before Admiral Thoran, presenting their proposal for an expedition into uncharted space. "We want to seek out new life, new civilizations," Scott explained, "to expand the alliance and ensure that this peace we've won is maintained." Thoran listened intently, his expression thoughtful. "It's a bold plan," he said finally. "But if anyone can pull it off, it's you two. You have my full support." Preparations moved quickly after that. A ship was outfitted for their mission, incorporating the best technology from all allied species. As they made ready to depart, Scott and Kalar found themselves at the forefront of a new age of exploration and diplomacy. Standing on the bridge of their new vessel, Scott turned to Keller. Their eyes met and a wealth of emotion passed between them through their link. Love, excitement, willpower, all mingled together in a rush of shared feeling. "Ready?" Scott asked, though he already knew the answer. Kellar's scales rippled with anticipation. "Always," she replied. As one, they gave the command to launch. Their ship lifted off, carrying them towards the unknown. Behind them, Earth grew smaller, a blue jewel representing all they had fought to protect. Before them stretched the vast expanse of space, filled with endless possibilities. Scott and Kalar stood together at the helm, their hybrid nature a bridge between worlds, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Their journey was just getting started. In many ways, it was just beginning. But whatever the universe had in store for them, they would face it together, their bond stronger than ever. The ship accelerated, streaking into the depths of space. New horizons beckoned, promising adventure, discovery, and the chance to forge connections across the stars. For Scott and Kalar, it was the start of a new chapter in their extraordinary partnership, one that would shape the future of the galaxy for generations to come.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.